Fernando Alonso appears to be touting himself for a shock switch to Mercedes in 2025, and we feel confident in saying that he is Mercedes' plan B to replace Lewis Hamilton. We say plan B because we also feel confident in saying Mercedes already has another driver in mind to take over from Hamilton at the end of 2024. Andrea Kimi Antonelli is only 17 years old and hasn't even raced in Formula 2 yet, but Toto Wolff considers this kid to be the new Max Verstappen and wants him ready to become George Russell's teammate in 2025. So we're looking at a battle between the most experienced driver on the 2024 grid and a youngster who's still at least a year away from making his F1 debut to grab one of the most coveted open seats on F1's 2025 driver market. The whole world knows what a formidable champion Fernando Alonso is. He hardly needs to remind anyone of his remarkable skill set. But on the eve of the 2024 season, it's as if he's deliberately advertising his credentials for other teams to consider as he enters the final year of his current contract with Aston Martin, especially now the driver market has been completely reset by Lewis Hamilton's surprise switch to Ferrari for 2025. At the launch of Aston Martin's 2024 car, Alonso made a point of highlighting the fact he is the only world champion on the current grid without a confirmed drive for 2025. Since the second half of last year, Aston Martin team principal Mike Crack has been making no secret of his desire to extend Alonso's stay at the team, and that is something Crack reiterated at the launch of the new AMR 24. The fact Alonso has not yet chosen to progress that interest into an actual contract extension suggests Fernando is not in any great hurry to renew. Why would he be, given his own standing within F1 and the ambiguity surrounding the 2025 driver market since Hamilton dropped his bombshell? On the one hand, Alonso says he still needs to decide if he even wants to keep racing in F1 in 2025 and calls Aston his first priority. But Alonso, being Alonso, when he says succeed for the future, he doesn't necessarily mean continuing where he and Aston were in 2023 or even winning the odd race. He's in this game only to win races and world championships, and at 42 years old, that means going wherever he needs to be to advance that cause. You can read between the lines quite clearly. If Alonso doesn't believe Aston has the capacity to win a championship within his timeframe, he would look elsewhere for somewhere that might, and that's where Mercedes comes firmly onto the radar. Okay, Mercedes is going through a very difficult patch, but the team finished second in the Constructors' Championship in 2023 and has made very substantial changes to its car for 2024. Aston Martin made substantial progress in 2023, but only finished 5th after losing its way within season development and getting overtaken by Ferrari, McLaren and Mercedes. Aston describes its 2024 car as an evolution of last year's design. On paper, the Mercedes Works team would be a clear step up for Alonso and a much more likely route back to the front of the grid in the short term. Hence, Alonso has begun 2024 selling himself. He talks about being fitter than ever after modifying his training regime and hiring a nutritionist. He says he wants to be ready to give 200% to whichever team he races for in the future, is prepared to do simulator work and marketing work, the sort of stuff a driver of Alonso's standing would ordinarily make sure is left to the younger driver in the team, as former Alpine teammate Esteban Ocon well knows. Marketing work, really? This is a full-on sell. Alonso even repeated the fact he's the only world champion available for 2025, while stressing how attractive he must be to rival teams for the performance and commitment he showed in 2023. He's basically giving himself a few months to judge if there's a route to another title before he retires and what that route might be. Remarkably, Alonso is already talking about racing towards his 50s if necessary. He says he has been exceeding expectations in the physical tests he has undergone over the winter and says if you are motivated and want to commit, you can drive to maybe 48, 49, even 50. This is something that hasn't really been possible in F1 since the earliest years of the World Championship in the 1950s. Juan Manuel Fangio remains F1's oldest champion, and he was 46 when he won the last of his 5 world titles in 1957. That's not to say Alonso will definitely want to race in F1 for 8 more years. He admits it requires total dedication and that he's curious to explore other things in life that may mean he stops well short of that age bracket. But what Alonso is saying is that he will go flat out, full commitment in the near term in his chase of a title he last won 18 years ago. And what a story that would be. If he's not convinced by what he sees at Aston, does he have a realistic chance at Mercedes? Absolutely, he does. From what we understand, he is not Mercedes' plan A, but is currently the absolute favourite for plan B. Mercedes' plan A, we firmly believe, is Andrea Kimi Antonelli, the 17-year-old about to embark on his first season in F2, who is rising through the ranks as a Mercedes junior driver. There is a feeling from inside the team that Antonelli is the new Verstappen, and that having lost out on signing the 16-year-old Max when he had the opportunity, Toto Wolff is keen not to repeat the mistake. Antonelli has been fast-tracked to F2 by Mercedes for 2024, having won multiple World and European karting championships, dominated German and Italian Formula 4, and wrapped up the 2023 Formula Regional European title, an intermediate step between F4 and F3, with 2 races to spare. If Antonelli does as expected in F2 in 2024, there is a very strong possibility he will directly replace Hamilton in 2025. Before Hamilton made his Ferrari announcement, the loose plan for Antonelli was 2 years at Mercedes-linked Williams before a move to the main team. In the meantime, being closely involved with the works team in simulator work, debriefs, etc., similar to how it went with George Russell. This explains why Mercedes didn't want to commit to longer than a 2-year contract with Hamilton covering 2024 and 2025. Mercedes already had an eye on replacing Lewis with Antonelli after potentially 1 season cutting his teeth at Williams. It also explains why Lewis decided to jump ship early, realising he could reach 2026 with nowhere to go. The Hamilton move has potentially brought the timescale forward for Antonelli. But if Antonelli's F2 season suggests he isn't quite ready for such a high-pressure move, that's when Alonso as plan B would become very attractive to Mercedes. In this scenario, Antonelli joins Williams for at least 1, maybe 2 seasons to learn his trade, giving Alonso at least 2 years to make that 3rd World Championship a reality. That's another reason why it makes sense for Alonso to bide his time on committing his future to Aston Martin, wait a few months for Mercedes to make its own judgment about Antonelli. If Aston Martin blows Mercedes away in 2024, as it was doing in the early part of 2023, Alonso probably has no need to rely on being Mercedes' plan B anyway. But if Alonso does end up moving to Mercedes, he would also be very unlikely to see himself as a simple seat warmer for 1 or 2 seasons until Antonelli is ready. Like Lewis, Alonso would see that as being well below a driver of his stature and ability, given he is comfortably within the top 5 performers on the current grid. If Alonso believes the Mercedes project is the better and faster route to another title, he will go there with the full belief that he will outperform George Russell, and that even if Antonelli arrives a season or 2 down the line, it will be Russell who has to make way instead. Plan A, Antonelli, and Plan B, Alonso, means others who have been touted for a Mercedes switch in 2025 fall further down the queue. A seat swap with Hamilton for Carlos Sainz now looks a remote possibility, and means Sainz probably now has a straight choice between replacing Alonso at Aston Martin, if Mercedes decides Antonelli needs more time, or heading straight for the incoming Audi project, where we know Sainz is wanted. A season at the Sauber-run Stake team in 2025 would give Sainz time to acclimatise as lead driver before Audi takes over properly in 2026, and would give Sainz the chance to reunite with Andreas Seidel and James Key, 2 key leaders from his time at McLaren. Alex Albon was considered to be one of the key players in the 2025 driver market even before Hamilton shook the whole thing up. But Williams team boss James Vowles has been explicit in declaring Albon under contract for 2025, meaning he either needs to stay put for at least 1 more season, or any interested party will need to pay Williams to release him. That appears to rule Albon out of a near-term switch to Mercedes, or to Red Bull in place of Sergio Perez, or even a smaller move up the grid to a team like Alpine, where both of the current drivers could potentially move on after 2024. However, we understand that Red Bull is seriously interested in bringing Albon back into its fold after that Williams contract expires. So much so that it's prepared to offer him a first option deal for 2026, which would take Albon back to Red Bull if Red Bull activated that option. Having released Albon to Williams in the first place and watched him rebuild his confidence to spectacular effect since being pummeled by Max Verstappen in 2020, Red Bull is known to view Albon as being perhaps the best fit with Verstappen in terms of driving style, so reuniting them would make a lot of sense. The risk for Albon is that it would potentially freeze him out of talks with other teams while Red Bull still holds that option on his services, and being released from that deal if Red Bull eventually decided not to recruit him for 2026 might come too late for Albon to still have decent options elsewhere. Albon being properly in the frame at Red Bull for 2026 would also mean Sergio Perez has a better chance of remaining at Red Bull for at least 1 more season in 2025, or that Daniel Ricciardo or Yuki Tsunoda would likely only get a short-term deal to replace Perez if Red Bull decides once and for all that Perez can't cut it alongside Verstappen. Whatever happens in the coming months, what we do know is that Hamilton's impending Ferrari switch has changed the landscape massively, and that what Fernando Alonso and Mercedes decide to do next will be absolutely key in determining how the rest of the 2025 grid shapes up.